Oh, we're live. Hi, Nick. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
Hey, Grace.
Okay, so to start the show, I would love for the audience to kind of know you a little bit more. So you have worked in China, India, and like you have like one of your like longer career journey over like 12 years. You worked at Jerry Yang's venture fund. Why don't we start with like what were some core lessons that you've learned early on in your career that you kind of took to where you are today?
Sure. Okay, so my background is kind of lots of places. I grew up in Scotland. I went to college in London. I then went to India for 2 years and started a travel company there with a friend from college. And then I fell in love with a Chinese girl and went to China and spent 3 years in Beijing. I learned Chinese. I worked for a local Chinese startup and all in Chinese. And so I spent 3 years there. And then I was like, I need to do something product related. I need to sort of have my mark on the world. And in China at that time, this was back in like 2009, 10, 11, 12, I felt like there wasn't kind of a place for someone in their mid-20s as a foreigner to kind of build a core skill, because I was still kind of just learning the language and everything. And I would end up being this kind of like just a cultural bridge. And I was like, no, there's more to it than that. And I want to go and learn from the best in my own sort of kind of culture, as it were. And so I was like, okay, I said to my wife, let's go to Silicon Valley. Steve Jobs had just died. And I was very enamored by his story and like doing what you really love and finding what you love to do every day. And I said to her, look, I have to go to Silicon Valley and just figure it out and just meet people and maybe try and get into product or something. So I came in 2012 with Alice. She was extremely gracious to come with me. And we moved from China to the US. And the eighth person I got to know in Silicon Valley was Jerry Yang through someone else who I knew. Who I'd been working for in China. It was an incredibly fortunate connection. And Jerry said to me, hey, while you consider your opportunities here in Silicon Valley, why don't we talk about how you could potentially help me with what I'm doing? And he was starting a venture firm. He just left the board of Yahoo. And he was starting to invest in startups. He'd done like 10 deals. And he was like, I want to do venture properly, not just sort of family office style, but more proper style, like my time, Jerry's time. And I want to build a team around it. And I said, well, that sounds amazing. I'll come hang out in the office. And after 6 months, that turned into about 11 years. And so for about 10 years, Jerry and I and two other colleagues, Jeff and Rich, have been investing in startups in Silicon Valley. And it's been an incredible roller coaster. So that's basically a little bit about sort of my early story. Lessons, you said. I mean, what kind of lessons in particular, like, are you looking to hear about? Because I don't really know. I'm still really young. I don't really have that many lessons, but I can share some of the things.
I feel like what I thought was like really interesting is like you guys also invest in like Zoom and some like other amazing companies. Maybe we could touch up a little bit on like, since you joined like the venture firm very early on, like how do you kind of like establish yourself in the venture world? Even like Jerry is like a really successful entrepreneur. For those who like maybe younger, like Jerry Young is like the founder of Yahoo. Maybe we could chat more about like, how do you guys leverage like a person's like personal brand to build up on top of it to like create like a successful firm? Or like what is the strategy of the firm too?
Yeah, okay, there's a lot of questions, but yeah, so I was in my mid to late 20s. I was new to the Valley. I had no Ivy League background. I had no MBA background. I was just a coder, basically. I studied electronic engineering. And it was challenging. I mean, like I felt, first of all, like I major imposter syndrome. I'm like, why me? Like, why me? Why am I here in this position? Like kind of speaking for Jerry, in dinners and things like that. Why am I why do I have the position to be able to make judgments on companies at this age? It just didn't make any sense. But at the same time, having Jerry as a boss was just such an incredible experience. And the reason is, I don't think Jerry has a brand with Yahoo for sure. But the amazing thing about Jerry is he's such a great person. He's a really, really down-to-earth, great person. And I think that is what attracts entrepreneurs to him. So for us to kind of build a culture at AME of like doing the right thing, being very founder friendly, even in the darkest times where most VCs might turn their back or basically want their money back or whatever, how do we continue to be supportive and super, super entrepreneur focused? And I think building a brand around that really, really helped. I think for me, it wasn't so much like, hey, Yahoo, yay. Jerry didn't have any Twitter following. He doesn't have a LinkedIn following. He still doesn't there's no like great way to promote your product through Jerry, really. So people wanted Jerry because he's great and because he's experienced and because he knows what it's like to take a company from 2 to 2,000 to 20,000 people. And so like that is why people wanted to work with Jerry. And so I think that is something that sort of I tried to absorb as much as I could, even in my much less experienced background. And just be humble, you know, and sort of understand the entrepreneurial journey. I think that was a big part of it. I always felt out of place though. Like at these dinners, I wasn't the puffy jacket wearing MBA grad. And I always felt like kind of a little bit like, you know what was funny, Grace? Like when I was meeting entrepreneurs, that's when I felt at home. I didn't feel like there was so much of a separation because I was trying to understand the product, the technology. And so for me, I think a big part of it was, and I was very fortunate to come from an engineering background. It was sitting with an entrepreneur, digging into the details, getting geeky with the product, asking to try it out, asking questions that a lot of VCs wouldn't ask, that I think would create this bond. And I remember this first moment, it was like a few years after I started with Jerry, where, and it was a few years, you know, before I built my own brand a little bit, where I was sitting with an entrepreneur and I said, hey, you know, by the way, it's not just me you get to interact with. If you'd like to, you can talk to Jerry too. You can go and, you know, it's not just me opposite you. And he said, I don't want Jerry, I want you. And I thought, wow, okay, that's cool. I've actually done something. Like I did something that's cool. And so that was kind of a nice moment. But I think finding a way you can kind of create a resonance of your own bond with the entrepreneur from your own story, because ultimately when you're sitting in front of an entrepreneur, they're looking at you as much as the firm, and they're looking at what they like about you and don't. And I think that's quite an important thing to sort of have a lot of humility around. But as I said, definitely living in the shadow, definitely felt like a huge leg up. It really still felt imposter syndrome for most of my entire career in venture.
I wonder, so like since I feel like you guys have a such broad portfolio, so there's like, you know, obviously there's like the Zoom, there's Lyft, there's Cruise, among like other companies. I wonder what was like the deal sourcing mechanism? Was it primarily inbound, or like since like we just talked about like a mutual friend went out like plug and play to like talk about other companies, like what was it like? Was the sourcing more towards like you know, a inbound deal flow, or like would you say like you have to build your own like deal pipeline at the very beginning to like acquire the best like deals?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, so deals come from all kinds of places. They come from connections. They come from existing entrepreneurs. They come from other board members of, you know, other VCs. They come from demo days. They come from inbound. So there's just so many sources. I personally prefer the sort of warm intro. I don't love the cold inbound thing. It's very hard unless you have a large team to go through inbound, you know, emails and things. And the signal to noise is quite low. So typically, if you're an entrepreneur, you really want to find a warm connection. You know, for me, obviously building my own source of deal flow was a big part of it, you know, not just relying on Jerry's deal flow. So building connections in the Valley, getting to be known as sort of like, we're doing a real thing now. Yeah, like it's not just Jerry, there's AME Cloud Ventures behind it. We're really serious about venture. So really building a brand around that so that people know to come to you and knowing what they come to you for. Because I think it's all very well to be known, but it's like, okay, why AME, right? That was quite important early on. And so we were all about, and still are all about, data. And I think we were a little bit ahead of the curve there. There was Data Collective back in the days. We're talking Jerry started in 2011, 2012. So talking about data back then was only just becoming, Hadoop had just launched, right? So it was all in the early days of sort of big data, pre-AI really. And so that was a lot of how we talked about ourselves. And therefore that was why we would get introductions and stuff and why people sought us out over time. So I think figuring out like, what is your MO? Why do people want you? It's important because you can't just do everything. You have to be known for something so that people come and they come for you for a reason. And then, yeah, like demo days. So like, you know, we were talking about like Tim at Fiscal Note. I was at Plug and Play demo day in 2013. I remember it really well. I remember I just randomly, I was like, oh, I've heard about Plug and Play. I'll go into their demo day. And it was more of like an in-house demo day. They obviously have people just come and sit in their offices. It's not even like they invest necessarily. And Tim really stood out to me. He was young, again, so it was 11 years ago. And this is Fiscal Note. And I was like, wow, that guy, he is buttoned up, smart, thoughtful, fast talking. I liked him a lot. And I was like, hey, I brought him aside at the end. I'm like, hey, here's what we do. Would you be interested in a conversation? And I honestly thought, like, to me, as the complete standout in the crowd, he wouldn't be interested in just randomly talking to a VC and taking a meeting. And I wasn't even sure of his fundraising. It turned out he was. And we did invest effectively, I think, the seed round a little bit after this first round. So that was just going to demo days and finding the standout people. It was very important. A lot of it is also about finding the right people. So that's something that's sort of a bigger question. But
Totally. I wonder when you were doing like, so I guess like, what was the thesis piece behind like Omni Cloud Ventures? Because I feel like the portfolio was like quite diverse, and I was like looking at each deals. There's like obviously like a lead from the team, and then from like a lot of the deals that you have done, they're also in some like different sectors. Like Embark, it's like a track company that's like very successful, obviously, and there was like different like data company and other sort of like companies in different sectors. What was the like? Can you chat a little bit more about like what was the kind of entry point that you guys are interested into? And you mentioned about like data driven. How does data plays into like how you kind of like filter your own deals? Like how do you kind of like leverage data to do like diligence or like picking in general?
yeah, so I think there's a few different questions there. One is sort of what was our thesis. Another one is sort of how we would do diligence. So, or how we would pick deals. I think that, as I mentioned earlier, yeah, the thesis was very much data-driven companies. So companies that were leveraging unique data sets, either to train models or just to build insights or to have unique data on their customers, which would then create sort of a network effect or a snowball or a nexus. That was really kind of our thesis. And again, I think we were kind of early to the game with that. Now, it's funny when I talk to entrepreneurs now, I say, hey, we are AI focused, but kind of I try and be humble about it and say, like, this is a whole different ball game now, right? It's a completely different ball game with AI than it was 5 or 10 years ago, even 3 or 4 years ago. But yeah, being data driven is very important when it comes to being a founder, obviously, and having unique data sets. So that's what we were looking for. We were looking for founders that had unique data sets and were doing interesting things with data. How we would do diligence, I mean, diligence is a lot to unpack. There's obviously like making sure that the ducks are in a row and there's nothing weird and about the company. But really making a commitment to a company is, for us internally, it was almost all about people. Because we're going early, you really don't know if the market's going to play out or if the product's going to play out. A lot of it was really kind of built on the vision of the founder. And so the way I thought about it, and I think I would still absolutely do this, is when you sit across the table from an entrepreneur or a person in general, what you're thinking is, hey, is that someone that's better than me in almost every way, right? Like, is ahead of me in the game, is adjusting their pitch based on what I'm asking them, has a high level of intellect, and they're clearly someone who could convince. And this is the sort of charisma part, but either they're charismatic or incredibly intelligent or both, ideally. But like, are they going to be able to convince? Would I want to work for them, first of all? And are they going to be able to convince 3 kinds of people to join their crowd? One is sort of other investors. Obviously, that's kind of table stakes. And then the next is customers. Are they going to be able to attract customers? And that they have the kind of a vision to do that, and charisma. And then the final one is most important, and that's other employees. Can they attract the best people to work for them and around them and augment them, right? And if you sit across a table from someone and you've seen the benchmark and the Eric Yuans of the world and the Tims of the world, and that they don't sort of meet that benchmark, or you don't think they could or grow into it, or you don't feel they could, then it's kind of a no, right? And when there's a yes moment, that's when you start to do diligence and start thinking about it. But for me, it's just so much about people. It's about really thinking about, is that someone I would want to work for, who's amazing in every way, and I would be excited to introduce to my team, right? And I think so. It's the funny thing is, you're looking for data-driven companies, but a lot of the decision is made about people, right?
I wonder, so like I like in terms of like portfolio constructions, obviously you guys have invest in like seed company to like a little bit later stage companies. How do you think about like, in terms of like at which stage to entry and like when like what kind of follow on structure are you guys kind of doing for the fund? Just like trying to get like a general sense of like, the fund strategy.
Yeah. I mean, again, so just to be candid,
Mhm,
this is sort of a more of a past thing. So a lot of
mhm.
my experience is talking about
Yeah.
my experience in venture, and I'm now running a new company. But
Mhm,
when it comes to AME and what we were doing at AME, what I was doing at AME, what AME still does,
mhm,
we really want to make sure that we continue to support entrepreneurs. So like we're always doing follow-ons, basically,
mhm,
if we can. And so we're super founder driven about that. And then when we talk about like the strategy around that, you do have to reserve capital for follow-ons. Like you just do. As the companies continue to grow, like you're just going to have to put more and more money to work. So that's obviously something you have to think about. But that's more of a financial thing, right?
I wanna maybe we could start talking about like Quill since like I feel like Quill is a great meeting summarization tool that like, a lot of like investors and founders have been using. Why don't we chat about like, how do you design the different templates and like also like how is it kind of like placed into people's like day-to-day life when they're using Quill to like summarize their meetings or like capturing like the important information of their conversations.
Yeah, sure. So maybe I'll just start with sort of how we founded it and the story.
Mhm,
So Mike and I have known each other for about 13 or 14 years now. Actually, we met in China. Um, and we had crossed paths various times. We moved to Silicon Valley together, actually, but to do different things. And so in the last year or two, we got very interested in this new wave of AI and what the capabilities were. And last year, we worked on something all summer. And at the end of the summer, we kind of knew it wasn't going to be a product. We were just kind of hacking.
mhm,
It was kind of an okay product, but it wasn't necessarily a company. Um, and then at the end of the summer, I was attending YC Demo Day, and I put together, I figured out sort of how to run
mhm,
local transcription on my machine, which I was blown away by. First of all, I was like, oh my goodness, like you can actually transcribe pretty high quality, like very good quality transcripts on your own local Mac. That's
mhm,
insane. That's amazing, right? That means that it's private. It means it's basically free. And the quality is insane. And you take these transcripts and you give them to an AI, that's when the real value pops out. And so
mhm,
Mike and I looked at each other, went, "Shall we do this?" And he was like, "Yes, let's do this." And what is this? So what is Quill? So basically we're like, hey, we want to build a product where it sits on your machine. You can use it anytime. You don't have to have it join as a bot. It transcribes on your machine. And then it's all about what happens on top of the transcript. So Quill is not really about the transcript. So the way we think about it is there's audio and then there's a transcript. And the transcript is like the exact words people said, right? And for about 4 or 5 years, because of some companies that are out there already, people
mhm,
have been used to the idea that they could, if they use one of these companies, they can transcribe the meeting and they can see the words that were spoken by everyone, right? And Mike and I were like, okay, that's great. But if you take that stuff and you give it to an LLM, you get some really great results out, depending on what you want. And our insight was, hey, like rather than a generic summary, which you get at the end of a meeting, why don't you get a summary that's very specific to you, right? So the same exact meeting between a founder and a VC, we're talking about VC right now, right?
mhm,
The same exact meeting between a founder and VC should have incredibly different kinds of notes. It's just a fact. You don't want to have the same summary. The founder wants, so the VC obviously wants to know all the metrics about the company, what the company does, etc. How the company is constructed, the team. They want to know all the metrics about the company, right? So they want their startup notes, we call them, right?
mhm,
But founders, they have a very different perspective. First of all, the VC may or may not have given much away at all. The VC may have just not said that much, but hopefully the VC has given away a little bit. Here's what the VC should have given away. They should tell them about their fund size. They should tell them about their process, obviously their name. And then there should be other facets. Potentially they've actually pitched as well, the VC, like, oh, here's what we do well. And then you got a bunch of questions from the VC, right? And then you got pushbacks from the VC. All that's data as well. Why isn't the founder getting a set of notes that's really specific to that particular meeting, but on the other side of the table? And that is what Quill is about. Quill is about saying, hey, no matter who you are, you should get really great notes that are specific to you out of a meeting, not some generic summary to kind of generally remind you what happened in the meeting. That's fine for some internal meeting where people have different takeaways and things like that. But to get to the core of your question, templates are basically that way that we use, that Quill uses, kind of like Notion templates, to say, hey, you were this kind of person in this kind of meeting. Here is what we think you should get out of meeting, right, for you. And you can have tons and tons of different templates. So our whole idea was, hey, you don't just want notes as the founder. You might want a follow-up email. You might want to send a different email internally, right? You might want full notes of everything that was said in the conversation, right? You might want Q&A. So Quill is about very quickly getting to something really great after a meeting that's super specific to you. And that's why we have templates, because what we learned was people don't always want to just ask AI questions. There's two problems with asking AI questions all the time about your meeting, which we do allow, by the way, obviously. We call it Ask Quill or Quill GPT or whatever. There are two problems with asking questions. The first is that you have to think about the question every time. So you have to type it and think it. And not everyone has the sort of bandwidth to think about the right questions to ask. Sometimes if you're just trying to ask, hey, was this said in a meeting? It's easy, right? But you may not know exactly what you want. You may not know how to format it. So there's a lot that goes into asking a good question on ChatGPT. I'm sure if you've used ChatGPT, you actually have to think quite a bit to get good results out, right? Which is fair enough. So that's the first reason we don't think that just asking is enough, and we need templates. And the second reason is you might have 5 founder VC meetings. You might have 10 VC meetings. You should be getting the same thing out of all of those VC meetings so that you can compare and you can put them all in a spreadsheet, et cetera, afterwards. You shouldn't be sort of saying, what did the VC say? And like prompting basically every time after a meeting. So Quill templates are a little bit complex to get started with, but they start to make a ton of sense as you start to have repeated meetings and you want to get something specific out of those kind of meetings every time you have those kind of meetings. And that's a long way of saying, how do we get started? And then what are templates and why do we love templates at Quill?
Totally. Obviously I'm a fan of the product, but I definitely want to touch up on like, number one is like who is like creating these templates? Is that like user generated, or would it be just like, from like the X person in each field, like they kind of put together, oh, hey, here's like my deal memo template. Obviously you worked in investing before, you probably have a template for that. But for founders or like for other type of group of people, like how do you kind of generate the template that everyone should be using, since like as you mentioned early on, like it's for people coming from different background, or like they may have like different takeaways. But I really agree with you on like there should be a template that you personally judge, I guess not judge, but like evaluate each meeting. How do you kind of like come up with a template that you feel like could resonate with like the majority of like people in a particular field?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we talk to users. We work with users. That's how we do it. We say, hey, how can we make this template really great for you? And then, hey, is it okay if we put this and publish it for other people to use? Once it's more generic, obviously, and doesn't have the company's name or whatever in it. So it's very simple. Users some of them can figure out their own templates, the power users, but most people, again, just want to click a button and have some good results and maybe tweak it a little bit. So it does take work. But that's another reason why it's really valuable, because that means that once we've done that work, we can kind of build on that. So actually last week, we just launched a template gallery. So it's a public facing gallery where you can go on Quill meetings and you can click on meeting templates and you can see all the templates we have. And we're going to start to add to that very quickly now. Everything from a very simple to-do list, like urgent, next week, I should do this, like just out of a meeting, very simple, like just give me what to do, to like very complex reports and investment deal memos and things that you can merge multiple meetings and then get them out or add context. So that's basically the way we do it. We talk to users, we publish, and eventually we'll let users publish themselves as well. It does take work, but again, that work is valuable because it creates a common format and a useful way to ask the AI, to ask Quill how to do something every time. And so as we publish them, you can download them and you can install them and you can use them. And that's basically how we do it. Kind of like Notion, right? Like Notion you have to seed the market a little bit, and then the users will start to sort of get it. And then like it's the Wikipedia thing, 1% or whatever, 0.1% will actually be the contributors. But that's okay because it's still a huge value asset to everyone else who visits and uses the content.
I like what you said about like, sometimes it takes a while for people to like really get a hang of it. But like I feel like after you like really known how like each part works within the system. I feel like it's actually Quill. It's like very easy to use too. Like it's you just like really open it and then like it just will transcribe the meeting in like the most like useful way itself.
How do you actually, just to turn it around actually, if I may, like
Yeah.
how do you, I'm actually curious because I know that you use Quill, but I
Yeah.
actually don't know how exactly you use it.
Yeah.
How do
I
you use it?
Yeah, so I feel like I talked to Michael a lot about like how I use it. I'm like the so like I use it as, for example, like right now, since we're having a public conversation, I'll transcribe it into uh Quail and then like basically memorize my meetings. I feel like it's really good for um like to recall what's the important information that's in the meeting, and I meant to like put together like a newsletter or something after each session, but so far I haven't been able to because I have like so much other stuff going on. But like I meant to like use Quill to transcribe it into a newsletter or like some summary for the audience, so people who doesn't have time to listen, they could just like see a quick transcription and then maybe move on to the important part if they want to listen, call like how to use Quill segment in our podcast. They could just one click into go to the 30 minutes and 26 second or something. So
Hmm.
that's like how I meant to use it. I feel like some of the meetings I have with my team, I would use Quill to like transcribe it so that people get like a quick to-do list to essentially like do the part that they are assigned to. So it's like a quick summary instead of like someone have to take notes, you have to wait for someone to send it to you or you send it to everybody. So this is like an automatic tool that you could just change a little bit and then like send it to your team. So I feel like it's an
Hmm.
effective way to get a great to-do list going for the team to move on with their day. um, I felt like one thing I thought was really interesting was, you guys were meant to like use Quell in like real life conversation too. Like where instead of like you go on Zoom to like record your meeting with a friend, you could use Quell to like record and then you can get like a summary of it. I thought that was like really cool to like free people up to do something more creative than like, you know, writing stuff down manually.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So our pricing is very aggressive because we feel like people should be using Quill not just for meetings, but for all kinds of things. So what I do is I just sort of brainstorm. I just talk about what I'm going to do that week or spec a feature out, and then Quill will transcribe it. But again, the transcription is not really the valuable part. It's all the stuff that happens after that. So it's
Mhm.
turning it into something useful. So for example, you can just sit in your car for 30 minutes, turn on Quill mobile app, just talk. And it does not going to talk that kind of,
Imagine I just sit in my car, drive somewhere, and then talk to myself. I
I
think it's
literally
a
do
good
that.
way. Honestly, it could happen, but I need someone to ask me questions. Otherwise, I don't know what to talk about.
Interesting. So if you have ideas, you just monologue on sort of what you need to do that week. You could in one 30-minute monologue, you could spend 20 minutes talking about how you're going to spec a feature out or how this thing should work. And then 5 minutes on an email you want to write, and then another 5 minutes on a to-do list for your week for that week. And then you could pull out just the to-do list easily from Quill, right? So Quill allows you to kind of extract information from conversations, and the conversation could just be a monologue. So that's the way I would use it. And then also just talking with Mike and my team, just randomly brainstorming. That's the nice thing about the mobile app is you can just record all that stuff, right? I think there's so much that you can do because the thing is, like when the human ingenuity and the creativity that comes when you're talking and when you're thinking is not going to be replaced by AI in any time I can see, despite having worked with these tools. And we always try the latest models and things like that. We're trying to be at the real forefront of what's actually going on with AI because it's very vital for our company. But I don't see, even with O1 and other kind of newer models or newer techniques, I don't see a path to true human level ingenuity, creativity, and problem solving is one thing, but ingenuity, judgment, and creativity and perspective, like those things, and making the right decisions, those things are not like going to come out of AI. So you can figure that out. Just talk about that stuff, all the stuff we do really well, and then have AI do all the dirty work. The dirty work is like summarizing it, sending it to your team, figuring out the right messaging, writing a blog post based on the complex topic which only you understand, and AI could never have come out with it itself, right? So that's the key. It's like, how do you kind of be more human, do more work you want to do, but do it in a way that doesn't feel like work? It's just like thinking. So there's only, you're basically short-circuiting the entire thing. You're going straight from, thinking and talking straight to the work, rather than having to do all the middle grunt work yourself. And I think that's basically what this generation of AI is giving us. It's super, super exciting, because you do more of what makes us uniquely human. And that's our vision, is like, use Quill to do what makes you more human, to do what you do really well, rather than kind of all the dirty work, right? Or send a bot to the meeting in your place. I think that's kind of a very weird idea. I don't understand at all. Like, why would you send a bot to a meeting? Then all the bots are just going to talk with each other, but they're not going to achieve anything, because as far as I've seen, there's nothing that says that these bots are going to do anything useful at all. The reason is they don't have all the things I just mentioned: the ingenuity, the creativity, the judgment, the perspective that humans have. So there's no way that sending a bot to a meeting is useful, unless you just want to record it, in which case you can get a recording from someone else. So we are all about, hey, do real great stuff as people, and let Quill do all the dirty work behind the scenes.
I wonder, so like, who is actually like creating the tone that like the Quill has been using? So like, basically, I feel like Quill also have like a specific vibe. I don't know how to describe it. It's like short, concise, and like bullet point summaries. Like, so what does a prompt actually look like to generate something like this?
Do you like it?
I think like it is good for like internal meeting for sure.
Yeah, interesting. For content creation, we actually have new templates. So we should talk through that. You were talking earlier about how you wanted a newsletter and stuff. Like, some of our newer blog and content generation templates, they run on a different pipeline, which is specifically designed for content generation and creativity. So they're really good now. For internal meetings, the kind of short and to the point style, I think is something that's just a style that Quill has. Quill is it just tries to get to the point. It doesn't try to say a lot of stuff that isn't useful. Like, you get a weekly email from Quill, and it's sent directly from your machine to you. And that weekly email is not designed to be like, hey, Grace, you're amazing, everything you did is so great. It's meant to be, hey, you should be thinking about this. Like, you should also think about this thing. So we're trying to be like useful.
Yeah.
And
The
like,
Quill newsletter sometimes scare me, because I'm like, oh, why is like everyone I know in one email? And then I realize it's a Quill email that I have internally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So people really like that email a lot, because it's sharp. It's not pandering to you. It's not like waffly AI speak, right?
Oh,
and so we do a lot of work.
You know what you guys should build? I'm sorry, I'm just brainstorming. I feel like you guys should just create the startup founder do the investor update, like the email newsletter of investor update, if it can automatically generate based off all my meetings to send like a friend or
For sure.
investor
That's a great
update,
idea.
it would be a great tool, because I feel like the newsletter was slash like an investor update. It's probably one of the hardest thing to write, because you have to collect so much data. Some sort of like report generation would be awesome, like where you can just automatically script
actually,
the meeting notes.
that's a really good idea. I think what we could do is we could aggregate all the meetings into that update. Although there might be a lot of stuff that's not really super relevant to the investors.
Maybe you can like crowd select like meeting 1, 2, 3, and then summarize.
Yeah, that's right.
Something.
So
I'm just
a little
brainstorming. I'm like,
yeah, no, that's great. So actually, the last 3
better.
quarterly updates that I've done for our investors were done with Quill. And actually, every weekly update email that you get as a Quill customer saying, hey, what happened this week with Quill, is also done with Quill. So what we do, seriously, we just talk. Mike and I, we just talk. We're like, hey, what do we want to tell investors? And we'll just brainstorm. And yeah, you can fill in the numbers later. That's the beautiful thing about Quill, is you can edit stuff before you send it out. But you just talk, and then you get this investor update. You say, hey, please write my investor update email for me, or write my weekly email. The weekly email we have a template for, and I just launched that actually yesterday. So other people can use the weekly email and just monologue what's new with their product, and you get a nice update email with emojis and stuff like that. You can send to your customers. Again, just another one of the million things you can do with Quill, but you're spot on the investor update. I think we could probably do better on like making sure that people can know how to select multiple meetings to do that. But yeah, that's exactly one of the million use cases we have for the product. A big inspiration for Quill was Notion. Notion is a catch-all tool that does a lot of things for a lot of different people. So how do you direct people who are doing a particular thing to a workflow? And that's what templates are. But that's and meeting types. But that was a big inspiration for us. It's like, hey, you can do a lot with this tool. So let's kind of, how do you unlock that power? It's not easy, right? User experience wise and everything else. Like, we're still working through a lot of that stuff because it's just very powerful. And some of the ideas you have, actually, almost everything you said, we can already do. We just need to be better at telling people how to do it.
I wonder when it comes to like creating specific type of template, how do you decide on like which specific things to create each time? So obviously we have like the founder template, the investor template, and like how do you decide on like, which segment to like focus on or like, expand into?
That's a really good question, Grace. So we're starting with a few segments that we know really well, and then we'll expand from there. So right now we're talking about like founders, VCs. Then we have like kind of solopreneurs, consultants, and so we have some also executive coaches. So we have quite a lot of good templates for executive coaches. So we start with what we know, and we build sort of a base around that, a foundation around that. And then as users come in from other industries, we talk to them, and then we can build on that, right? That's basically the way we do it. And we know founders really well because we are founders, and right? And then I was a VC, and we know VC very well as well. And so a lot of VCs really, really like the product. And I think basically they really like the product because of startup notes and portfolio notes. Oh my goodness, the portfolio notes are amazing as well. When you meet a portfolio company, you have different sets of questions and outputs that you want than when you're meeting the startup for the first time, right? So it is a startup you're meeting, but they're your portfolio company now. And so we detect it's your portfolio company, and then we give them really good portfolio notes as well. And they basically have a table of metrics, things I should keep an eye on as an investor, right? Things that you would. Again, the beautiful thing about what we can do now is the notes that come out of this product are so much better than I would ever have written as an actual VC. Even with my own time, I could never do notes this good. So that's basically why these sort of beachhead markets they really like us. And then we pull in other markets from there, and then we talk to those people in those markets. You got to just keep talking to your customers. That's how you learn how to build stuff in that industry, right?
I feel like it's to create like a consumer product, the entire design, go to markets like very different than like B2B SaaS sales in general. How do you spend your time as a CEO to go after like maybe group buying from the corporate versus like the onboarding like individual people? What's your kind of like thought process on like creating the different experiences on like how to expose Quill to people?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what I learned from Zoom is that this sort of long tail is really, really important. It's really important because there's a few reasons it's important. The consumer tail, they force you to create a product that's self-service. Because if you don't create a product that's fully self-service and easy to adopt, you're screwed basically, right? And actually, enterprises don't like the product as much either. So you have to have a product that's as easy as possible for consumers to use, so that you are not wasting your time, okay, with like every single onboarding. Although we do like to do that because it's a nice way to engage with people and to understand what they want and to learn from them. So we still onboard people, but the key is that over time you have to have a product that's good enough that doesn't need onboarding, right? And there's another thing it gives you as well, and that's that some of those people end up being enterprise customers with Gmail addresses, and then they are like, oh, this is great, and then they pull in the enterprise. That's absolutely essential as well. So this is kind of the consumer focus, and then the enterprise focus. We obviously do get those questions, and we do have team plans now. So, and we're pushed in that direction faster than we thought. So, and those people require a little bit more work, right? There's compliance stuff, there's audit stuff, there's stuff that, especially around conversations, people care a lot about, that we have to have bandwidth to talk to these people about, and we have to do that. So it's really important to engage with those customers, because you might spend a week talking with them, but then they bring in 10,000 seats. So it's really, really important to do the enterprise stuff as well. But you can do both, and that's what Zoom was. Zoom did both very well. Like they had a huge consumer business actually, and then over time you bring in inside sales and you start to talk to enterprise, right, in a repeatable way. And so that's basically how we do it.
Yeah, I'm out of curiosity. Does like Zoom went for like both direction altogether? Or obviously there was like a major wave, which is COVID, and that kind of like accelerated the growth process. But I'm always curious about like for a 2B product and 2C product all combined together. Like, do people go after a specific market first, or like do they just um kind of
Yeah,
like organically grew into something bigger?
No, look, right. Eric's pedigree was WebEx.
Mhm.
So
It's like
there
a
was,
corporate thing.
yeah, there was, look, he came out of WebEx. It's very, he came out of WebEx and said, I can build a better product, a much better product. And I can't do it here. I need to do a new company. So that's what Eric did. And his whole vision was the better product just needs to be there. And the thing is, the better product then also attracted a lot of consumers. So you get both. You win both if you build a better product for enterprise, I think. I mean, there's a lot of markets where consumers don't want your product at all, and you should still build a really great product in enterprise, by the way. So it's not like you just need a good product or interface if you're only going for enterprise. The point is to do both. You kind of win at both if your product is good, and you don't need to spend a lot of bandwidth on it. Like there was no one at Zoom that I know of ever doing like consumer marketing or whatever, right? There's brand awareness, but there was no targeted advertising or anything for consumers. There was no need to. It was spreading virally anyway. And so the first deal Eric got was with Stanford, and it was very early on. It was right after we invested, actually, at the end of 2012. So and that was like him going and getting it because he had connections there. So you've got to just go after those things right away.
What's your thought process on like thinking about like, let's say if a big tech company, they could just build something like equivalent or like equally well, or something kind of like a replacement, since like I feel like nowadays, like when it comes to AI, like not only I feel like the startup landscape is sort of competitive, but like I feel like the bigger company are also um all geared up to like build like AI product quickly. What's the thought process on like, maybe entering the big market, like big company ecosystem, or like thinking about the competitive landscape in like the larger company spectrum?
Yeah, so my take on the current wave that's happening is I think the jury's out, actually. My take is that the big companies bolting on AI will still not win at some of the stuff that is available and possible to do now with AI. And the reason is sort of the AI first companies, there's something subtly different about the product. There's something that you can do that you can't do when you're just sort of adding a feature to a product. And so my sense is that the big companies are going to try, and they are trying, and with AI, they can develop faster too. And distribution matters a lot too. So it is important to have a distribution hack. But the key is that, can you build a really great product that is from the ground up, like satisfying the users, the sort of very aggressive needs of users these days around AI, that the enterprise can also do? And I think no. I think like the way I've got a bunch of founders that we kind of communicate with, and they're doing AI stuff, and like I look at what they're doing and I look at what we're doing, and we're not only moving faster, but because we're AI native, we can do things that the large enterprise isn't really thinking about. We can be more creative. We can build better products. So I think that you could clone it all you want, but I don't think the products that are built by enterprise or by large incumbents or are bolted on as features are going to be as good as the sort of AI native stuff. And I think eventually it's going to come to a head where there's going to be new markets created as well, right? That's the other thing, is you're not kind of trying to steal customers away from them. You're basically adding a new market. I mean, what we see, for example, is that like a lot of customers of ours are also paying Zoom and others, right? So like there's something going on there. Zoom has AI companion, right? But they're doing a great job with what they're doing, but it's just different to what Quill is. And so I think as new markets evolve as well, if it's not just a bolt-on, and if it is a new market, you have to believe the enterprise can actually understand, assess that market, and target it with a product or a bolt-on to their product that is as good as the new AI native guys who understand it much more deeply. And I think probably no for a lot of cases, not in all cases, but for a lot of cases, probably no.
Yeah, I really like what you said about like AI native. Can you maybe like unpack a little bit on like, what is like building an AI native company look like, and how do you leverage existing like AI tools to build on top of the function that you are currently creating?
That's a great question. I mean, I think being AI native is starting a company in the last 18 months. Because if you started a company in the last 18 months to 2 years, you have a completely different perspective on the tools available to you and how you build a product, and even the number of people you don't need in your company, right, than people who started a company anything before that. And so anyone who started before that is desperately trying to bolt on capabilities, but they're not thinking from the ground up about like what is possible with just LLMs and multimodal LLMs at relatively low cost these days. Whereas we're saying, oh, we can do what a 100-person company was doing 2 years ago.
Mhm.
But that 100-person company is still 100 people, still employed to do all those things. How do you retask those people to effectively and very quickly meet customer needs when they have 100 engineers who were building whatever they were doing back then, right? And I don't know what they were doing back then because I know I can do it with 3 people. So the agility you have and the product thinking is different too. You're like, oh, I could just do that with an LLM better. And that company has built up years of experience and pipelines to do that. It's really hard to unpick that. You're almost kind of cannibalizing your own engineering team in some ways to say, I could just do an LLM call to do that. And so our product has lots of LLM calls to do all kinds of things you wouldn't have thought about using them for a few years ago. That's what I think AI native is. It's saying, hey, how do you rethink an entire product pipeline, even engineering org, the way you manage your people around this sort of new paradigm? And I think that's why companies started in the last 18 months or so have a huge advantage, actually. It's not entirely apparent yet. It still feels like it could be, a little bit crazy. There's so many people starting companies, like all the incumbents seem to be catching up or whatever. But this feels like maybe 93, 94, 95 of the internet. It's still very early. And I think there's a huge advantage to starting at this exact period, right? I mean, a lot of people when the internet started were like, oh, Microsoft will just own it all, right? And how wrong they were, right?
I wonder when I really like what you said about like rethink about like the people that you're hiring. So, like, what do you think are still core today to hire, and what kind of skill set you think would be like incredibly valuable from the engineering side, or just like product, or like go to market side?
Yeah, I love that question as well. So AI. So first of all, you need to be able to leverage AI effectively as an employee now. If you're not, you have 2 issues, and I don't like either of them. One is that you're not curious enough to know how AI could help you, so you're kind of dismissing of it. And the other is you may not be effective enough at using it, so you're not maybe the best sort of at figuring out how to use prompting and stuff. So we think of employees in this age as having sort of a 40 to 50% plus leverage on AI because of versus pre. Okay, but what does that give you? It means you can have way fewer employees because now the communication overhead can be lower. So Mike and I did so much with just 2 people. It was completely ridiculous. And the reason is each of us had like a 40% boost, but then the communication bandwidth was incredibly high because it was just Mike and I, and we're basically on the same page. This is for the first however long until we started hiring people, right? And so why is that the case? Okay, so how do you get people, when you add to the team, how do you add to the team in a way that then continues to create this effect? And I think about it like this. Using AI to give you that 40% boost plus, right, is about managing a junior employee. AI is not super smart, and I don't think it will be for some time. So how do you give it the right instructions to get what you want out? You still need to be creative, you still need to be smart, you still need to have the insights, all the things I talked about earlier that are not going away for humans. But then you have to think about AI as this like your instructions have to be very clear, right? You have to be very, very specific with what you want. You have to have the right idea to begin with, because it will get kind of led in the wrong direction by people who don't know what they're doing, right? And so effectively, it's like having good middle management. I think like hiring today is like thinking about, it's probably more experienced people actually. It's people either who are young and have really shown they can manage an AI well, and they're kind of a little mini manager, or it's people who are more experienced and confident and not sort of put off by the idea that AI just hallucinates and I can't use it, which I think is a terrible, terrible way to dismiss it. So both Mike and I like heavily index people who can like leverage AI in a way that is effectively like they're a manager of this junior employee, and the junior employee is whatever AI they're using to help code, design, write prose, find things out quickly on domains they didn't know about like yesterday. Like that is what you should be doing, and you should be hiring people who are really good at that. And the people who are good at that, they have good judgment, they're good little managers, and they're confident, and they are curious people.
How do you test the skill of can they AI effectively?
Say again?
Like how do you test their like AI native
Yeah.
ability?
Yeah. Okay. Can they use AI effectively? I mean, that's how we
Yeah.
hire. But we literally like, hey, show us. You can build this thing, and you can use AI, and we're going to watch you. And the ones who are the fastest basically win, right? And do it well, right? Because a part of it is like if you're not a coder, you're not going to be able to use AI to code well. That's a fact, right? Like you can code, but not well. So the question is, can you create good quality results with AI fast? That's how we just literally just watch them. That's how it works.
Just like literally watch them to code something?
Yeah, I mean, or give it, come back in 2 hours or something, right?
Oh, okay. What's
Um,
the I
yeah,
guess
and so the other thing is actually we have them work on our stack, so we have them do a mini project for a day, and that's challenging because it's a new stack. And like 2 years ago, like, oh, I can't do that. I need 3 weeks of spin up time to understand your stack. No, not nowadays. Nowadays, you don't know Electron, you don't know whatever. Go ahead and learn it in 3 minutes, or give the right prompts to figure this out. So again, I think you should sort of throw away all the old assumptions about what's required and just go straight to the core problems that you're trying to solve. And AI massively helps you with that. And people who are confident to do that and do it well, those are who we want to hire. And we can watch them do that in half a day.
I wonder in terms of like from like the business perspective, you also mentioned like the AI could be doing like design and everything else. How would you hire effectively in terms of like growing your company onto the next level from maybe a sales perspective or anything like non-engineering side? That since I feel like on the engineering side, maybe there's a lot of um like processes that you could follow, but like I
Yeah.
feel like from the sales, like the go to market, like the marketing, everything is like needed to be like test out to a degree. So like how do you kind of like hire from the non um engineering or like non like there's no playbook kind of like perspective?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, it starts with like attracting really great
Mhm.
people. And we've been lucky to be able to do that. So I think, first of all, you have to attract good people. And then how do you kind of choose from the good people? I think it's the same, actually. The sort of curiosity that you need to use tools in these other domains is the same as an engineer. There's tons and tons of new tools that can help salespeople, that can help designers, that can help marketers. And you need to be using those tools, and you need to be really effectively using those tools to create more, better content, to leverage yourself. I think basically, look, Jobs was right back in 90, whatever, when he said the computer is, actually it was 80s, he said the computer is a bicycle for the mind.
Mhm.
AI is still a bicycle for the mind. It's more like a motorcycle for the mind. That's what AI is. So everyone has this motorcycle, not just engineers, actually. And yes, it's different in different domains, but you still look for this kind of like, oh, can you ride a motorcycle? That's what I care about. And I think that's the phase we're in right now. And I think we will be for quite a while.
Mm. I wanna like since like we're almost at the end of the interview, I wanted to maybe touch upon like, um what does your content diet look like for as a CEO of like an AI native company? How do you kind of like keep up on the newest like AI trend and then seeing which ones could be leveraged into the company?
Yeah. Thanks for asking that, Grace. Like I can't avoid it. Like I want to avoid it. Actually, it's actually very high stress. So
Mhm.
I like Twitter, LinkedIn. Like every time you grace these things, there's a new announcement. Instagram, even like evolving AI on Instagram is pretty good. Like you just can't avoid hearing about the latest things when you're in this space. I think I actually have the opposite problem. I want to focus more on my customers and like doing stuff day to day rather than get too carried away with the latest advancements. I think the information bandwidth these days is so high it can be distracting. And it can be anxiety inducing actually to sort of see everything that changed that day. And the more important thing as a founder is to kind of anchor yourself. So I think finding one or two sources that kind of don't get so, that are more maybe longer term, is important. For us, the main thing is like, what are the new APIs released? What are the new capabilities? What are the new products that are being released by people? Those are things that matter to us a lot. So it's these days LinkedIn is great. I like the vibe on LinkedIn quite a bit. Twitter is much more of a madhouse, like everyone just kind of screaming at each other, and you feel like really stressed. I feel, but like it's a good place for early adopters as well. And then there are other channels and blogs and things like that. But I feel like I can't help but be informed. It's impossible to live in a hole these days unless you literally have no internet.
I feel you. Like, where do you got the newest like API update or like newest capability? I feel like it's really hard to follow too, as like the news could come off everywhere, and then I'm not exactly sure if there's like a one place that's like the best to find like all the technical update.
Yeah. There's the press releases get disseminated immediately when Anthropic or OpenAI or anything comes up with something new. It is immediately out there, and one of my team will find it, for example, and that's it. That's all we need to know, because at that point we don't need to know all the, no offense, but we don't need to know all the bros on Auto GPT who figured out how to use it to do some weird thing and had some cool demo on Twitter. I just need to plug it into my system and to figure out how we can use that API right immediately and give our users the best leg up if it makes sense for us. So it very quickly for us as builders, it has to go from like the news to, is it useful? And if it's useful, how do we use it? Versus like getting carried away with all the stories related to it or the hype, right? Because as a founder, the good thing about being an AI founder these days is you can immediately cut the hype from the reality, because you're living on the ground, right? You're kind of fighting in the trenches. So when a great thing is promised, you can immediately test it out, right?
I really like that, like, following maybe like just like some major updates from like the more established like models, and then essentially like trying out things like immediately after it comes out to see if it like fits into the acceleration of like your current products.
100%. And actually there is one website that I use that I could recommend to people if you're interested. It's called artificialanalysis.ai. And it quickly gives you a graph of evals versus price point. I really like that for different models. Unfortunately, it's just for the existing latest models. I want it to have more data. And you have to be very careful when you're a builder about evals, because evals aren't necessarily correlated to how you would get the most out of that, right? Evals are very dangerous, but at least for price and latency and things like that, it's really useful. So yeah, just looking at the raw data is really, really useful as a founder. Say again?
I just open it. I'm like, wow, it's like literally okay, sorry, keep going.
Yeah. So just separating the hype from the reality is the important thing, because there's the reality, which is there's a new API, it's on, do I have access to it? Yes. We're in the early adopter, whatever. Yes, we can use it. Okay, let's try it. That's all I need to know. I don't need to know that like, oh, this is going to change the world. This is the next big thing. Oh, OpenAI is dead because Anthropic. I don't need to know all that hype. I'm not interested, to be honest. I just want to know like what the capabilities are, and does it impact our users and make our customers happier.
For sure. So I also want to like ask like one real question and then 1 minute fire round. Another real question is like, I think you mentioned early on that like, basically like when you went to YC Demo Day, you could get like a local transcription. What does local transcription mean? So I know it's like, is that just like talking about like the transcription is on your laptop instead of like it is going on, you have to go on like Alter or something like to like transcribe after recording as an MP3? Why does the local thing matter? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, so the local thing matters for a ton of reasons, and we're super, super excited about this. So what we do at Quill is, whether you have a Mac or a Windows machine, the audio, and you can import the audio, as you mentioned, from a demo day, or you can just record it live on that machine. is turned from audio into transcript, which is what people said on the machine itself. And that's really important. Why is that important? It's important for a ton of reasons. The audio never leaves your device. That means that it's not stored in the cloud anywhere. It's also really, really great for your cost. It costs a lot less, right? So there's a huge number of advantages to doing the transcription locally, and that's effectively what we do. So we still use the cloud for generating the notes. But the other thing about Quill is we don't store or log anything in the cloud, and we make sure our partners don't either. So the huge privacy advantage here too. Your stuff or your ideas, your content, your creativity, all that stuff doesn't end up in someone else's data center, right? Like training their models and everything. That's the thing about Quill is we let everything be on your machine, and we make sure it's fully private to you. And so that's what local transcription plus our data policy gives you.
Amazing. Okay, so last question. What are the features that you won't be building? How do you evaluate something will make like a major impact on someone, or is this like a trial and error process? Like you built like call it 10 different features, and then to see which one like people kind of like stick with.
Do you say how do we evaluate what we won't be building?
Yeah.
So we do a lot of experiments. Yeah. I mean, you can do experiments really fast now. So you can throw things out, you can see how they perform, you can see how they're used, you can roll them back. Customers, they ask for a core set of functionality, which is not going away, which is notes and templated notes. And then there's a whole bunch of other things that we are experimenting with all the time. So that's, we're pretty data driven about it, and you can iterate so fast. That's how we can do it. There's some domains. Look, Mike and I, we did look at this space like 6 months ago, a year ago. We were like, hey, do we want to be this tool which tries to do everything for people, or do we want to really focus on meetings and audio and conversations? And I think that was a big strategic choice where we decided we were just going to do the conversational part right now. And we're not going to try and so we'd rather kind of send the notes, the templated notes out to Notion, and you can create a great Notion doc, than try and also do what Notion does, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think of Quill as like a nexus for your conversations to then come in and then do cool stuff and go out to places where you want to use them as well. That's what we think of Quill as. So there is kind of a little bit of a hard barrier there around like, we're not going to start like being a project management tool if you already have a great project management tool. But yes, testing small features, we can write those all very quickly, and we can experiment with them very fast.
Amazing. Okay, so we're at the last part of the chat. I have a quick 1-minute fire round for you. What's your favorite book?
Probably Three-Body Problem.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
That's a good question. Maybe Trump. I kind of want to talk to him and just suss him out. Like, I don't think that's a weird one to say, but yeah.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
Jerry, for sure.
Where can we find you outside of work?
I do a lot of flying in VR. So on Discord with my friends, flying in VR on Microsoft Flight Simulator.
I'm sorry, what? Flying on VR? Like,
yeah. So in VR, so like I spend quite a lot of time like flying down Scottish Glens in a fighter jet with my friends in formation, like in VR. So I'm looking around in VR.
That's so specific. I'm sorry. Okay, Nick, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was so fun to learn more about like the behind the scene of Quill.
Really nice to speak with you, Grace. Yeah, thanks for your time.
Okay, let me quickly